Hello everyone and welcome to my Dark Knight guide for Final Fantasy XIV and Heavensward. Now note that I am making this guide before the Alexander raid comes out, and because of that a lot of things I say here may change, especially since the Dark Knight is crippled with bugs. Bugs such as moves not doing what their description says, to increase mana consumption for invalid reasons. So to start off, let us begin with an overview of the Dark Knight and what it's all about. As many of you probably already know, the Dark Knight is a tank role job, obtained within Ishgard, and as such you must already have a job at level 50 and finish the 2.55 storyline. The job begins at level 30 and abilities are obtained normally from leveling, and job quests like any other job, except they fall under the job category as there is no base class. I suggest you level both Marauder and Gladiator before picking up Dark Knight because of two reasons. One, you get to learn how to tank in Final Fantasy XIV from a low level, and two, the Dark Knight cross-class abilities from both Gladiators and Marauders, which is incredibly useful if not required in a raid level environment. The Dark Knight differs from every other tank in that it heavily requires the user to constantly keep track of every single resource the game has to offer. That is, HP, as you're constantly being hit and need to use cooldowns, TP, just for the basic actions, and MP to either defend or increase your damage output. I have played every single job in Final Fantasy XIV up to level 50, except Machinist and Astrologian, and I can safely say that so far this is the hardest job to master, especially when compared to the Paladin or the Warrior. They do not have a shield, so they kinda lack the powerful block mechanics the Paladins have, but at the same time they have almost as much damage mitigation as one, and therefore they can take hits a little bit nicer than a Warrior. However, due to the Warrior's increased health and healing buff, the amount of damage feels about the same when comparing a Warrior to a Dark Knight. The Dark Knights have a wide variety of utility to fill in for other classes that ultimately do their job better, so think of it like a jack of all trades but master of none. As far as main tank or off tank is concerned, the Dark Knight, while not as good as a Paladin is a main tank or a Warrior is an off tank, it is still really good at doing either, but it is inclining to be more of a main tank than an off tank, mainly because of the fact that they can pull out a lot of DPS while in grid, and they can still proc a lot of things while parrying, which requires you to be tanking in order to do that. Therefore, main tank. So now that we went over the basic overview of the Dark Knight, let's move on to the basics. First of all, let's talk about MP. MP management. I mean, MP is everything to you as a Dark Knight. MP is how you do AoE aggro and snap aggro. It's how you DPS. It's how you defend. So you have to keep an eye on it almost 24/7 in order for you to work as a job. There are two little abilities that you need to know about. There's Grit and then there's Dark Side. Grit does the same thing as Shield Oath, reducing damage dealt to you and the damage you deal by 20%. It's just, it's a standard tank stance. While Dark Side is where the Dark Knight comes to life. Dark Side can be considered a DPS stand, although it is much more than just that. While in this form you can deal 50% more damage, and you can in fact use it along with Grit, but your mana is consumed over time when you have Dark Side on. Not only that, while under this form you gain access to a crazy amount of spells and cooldowns that more often than not actually consumes your MP even more. For example, you have abilities such as Dark Mind, which reduces the magic damage dealt to you by 15%, and it can only be used under the Dark Side. You also have Dark Passenger, which is an AoE, a line AoE in front of you that can only be used on the Dark Side, and this one consumes mana. Dark Knights that are starting out may not want to overuse Dark Side that often, and just stick with Grit for the time being, as it makes it easier for you to tank, since you're only just grabbing aggro. But at the same time, you sort of sacrificing cooldowns and such that may make it harder on your healer and the overall party DPS. Otherwise, always have dark side up. It doesn't matter if you had grid on or not. Always use dark side because it is a straight up DPS increase and allows you to utilize new abilities that otherwise you couldn't do. While in dark side, you cannot get mana regen from an outside source, such as wards or machinists. So you have to rely on your personal mana regen abilities, and this is where the job starts getting harder. The Dark Knight has 5 ways to gain mana in their kit. There is Siphon Strike, which works the same as the Paladin's Riot Blade. It's a combo ability that restores a bit of MP. There's Blood Weapon. It's a 40-second cooldown that lasts for 15 seconds. It converts damage into MP as well as increases skill speed by 10%, which is really nice. But this cannot be used under grit, meaning you cannot do this while tanking unless you want to be really risky and not use grit while tanking. But you can use this while off tanking, which is what it's meant to be. There's Blood Price. It's a 40-second cooldown that lasts for 15 seconds. It restores a small amount of MP when damage is taken. Really good when tanking more than one mob. There's Soul Survivor. It's an ability that you place it on a target, and after 15 seconds, if that target dies, you receive 20% of your HP and MP back. This sits on a 120-second cooldown though. And finally, you have Carve and Spit. It's a 60-second cooldown that hits a target with the potency of 100 and consumes a good amount of MP. On the Dark Arts, it does 450 potency, but does not consume MP. Speaking of which, let's talk about Dark Arts, which is basically a Dark Knight mechanic I have come to love and hate at the same time, for many reasons. Essentially, it is an ability that sits on a really quick 5-second cooldown and lasts for 10 seconds on yourself. It consumes a good chunk of MP, however, and can only be used while in Dark Side, so you can tell how this could be problematic. Some moves will then be able to use up Dark Arts in order to perform a buffed version of themselves with different effects. So here are some examples. With those out of the way, let's talk about an ability that some people have been having a hard time understanding, including myself, and that is Living Dead. So Living Dead is an ability that once you hit 0 HP, if it is up, you will go into a state called Walking Dead for 10 seconds. If you are not healed to 100% of your health, you will instantly die once Walking Dead runs out. Now, this description is very misleading because it sounds like the healer needs to top the Dark Knight to max health, and this is actually untrue. What needs to happen is that the healer must heal you for the amount of health you have during Walking Dead. It does not matter if you have full health, as you may get hit in between heals. There isn't much else to talk about as far as abilities go, except how Dragon Kick from Monks overrides the 10% less damage debuff that Delirium puts. All you need to know is that Dragon Kick does the same thing, and also puts a blunt damage debuff alongside it, making it an overall better debuff than Delirium. So let's move on to cross-class abilities. I personally use Provoke, Convalescence, Bloodbath, Awareness, and Foresight. However, Foresight can easily be replaced by Mercy Stroke, since Foresight is actually a really bad cooldown in the grand scheme of things. And with that, let us move to more in-depth rotations. So due to the Dark Knight's tank nature, there are a variety of viable rotations depending on the situation. Gear, party composition, player lag, player skill, and the list goes on. I'm simply going to narrow them down to more general ways that more or less should work regardless. First, you should start single target pulls with Salted Earth, followed by Plunge. Unmend is also liable but not necessary, at least not at level 60. If you want to play it safe, putting the Delirium debuff up and creating Enmity, a good single target combo is Power Slash combo, into Scourge, into Delirium combo, into Dark Arts Soul Eater combo, into Delirium combo, into Dark Arts Soul Eater, into Scourge, and then repeat. As you may have noticed, the Power Slash combo builds enough aggro for you to keep the enemy on you by just using the enmity build from hitting with the other combos. So it is actually pretty useless. For example, most of the time I do not even use it as there is no benefit other than dragging aggro, which I would generate plenty of with the other two combos that I have the benefit of regaining MP with. In which case I would use the DPS rotation instead, which is Scourge, into Delirium combo, into Dark Arts Soul Eater combo, times 2, so you do it twice. Delirium combo, Scourge, and then Dark Arts Soul Eater combo again, and you just rotate from here. There are a few variations of this one as well. If you don't care about putting Delirium up, like you have a monk in your party or something, you can simply start with Scourge into Dark Arts Soul Eater for more initial DPS and aggro. Here is a quick example of me playing around with the rotation, screwing up some parts as I was trying to see what worked along the way, but yeah, here you go. Finally, the AoE rotation. Now there are two ways that you could be AoEing. One, you are tanking, and two, you are not tanking for some odd reason. If you are tanking, the rotation would be Salted Earth, Blood Price, spam Abyssal Drain until Blood Price wears off, or until you hit 50% MP after Blood Price wears off, and then you wait until Blood Price comes back, and then spam Abyssal Drain once again. Pretty straightforward. If you're not tanking and you're AoEing, it's a very weird situation, but you could do Salted Earth and then spam Abyssal Drain until you're 50%, and then pop Blood Weapon, and then use that to gain some MP, and then spam more Abyssal Drain. Essentially, you want to get as many Abyssal Drains as you want, as long as you have above 50% MP. You can get a little bit lower than that, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now that we understand rotations a little, let's talk about stats. As a tank, your main attribute is Vitality. This determines how much HP you have and how much damage you can take before you die, so you want a lot of this. Strength is your second most precious stat. With strength you do more damage and more aggro. Balancing strength and vitality is key. As of right now, having an amount of 13 to 14,000 HP is completely safe to run anything up to Ravana EX, so gear yourself accordingly. Determination, while nerfed since 3.0, it is still a very precious stat as a tank due to the healing increase, so having more of this will never hurt. Crit rate was buffed, now affects the amount of damage you deal when you crit, meaning this is really good stats to have now in order for you to DPS more. Parry is to be determined, however, due to the Dark Knight having 2 procs of the parrying moves, this stat is, at the very least, more important to Dark Knights than it is to Paladins or Warriors. Finally, skill speed. This is a good stat because it does increase your DPS and the amount of damage that your dots do. However, I have noticed that Dark Knights can hit TP floor insanely fast, and even more if you are using Blood Weapon, which means this could be considerably bad on long fights. Accuracy is what you build your gear set around. It is important to hit 100% of the time, especially for tanks, since attacking from the front requires more accuracy than flanks and back. Luckily, you get a 5% buff when you use Grit, but for reference, you need around 571 accuracy to hit Ravana EX, and it will only increase from here. So a few final notes for when running content with Dark Knight. Drop Dark Side between pulls, even if it is just for a little amount, your MP will generate faster. Be sure you know the pulls and how much MP you will need to use to keep aggro. Be sure to know boss rotations to know when you will be receiving damage to make full use of Blood Price, as well as what type of damage it is. Is it magical, so you should use Dark Mind? Is it physical, so you should pop Dark Dance? If you trust your healer and it is a boss that does not focus you down or hit you that hard, do not be afraid of getting rid of Grit. Also, in moments when you are not required to tank and just DPS, for example, the ad phase in Nihawk's fight or killing the fireballs at the last boss of the vault, always take Grit off. It does help. Otherwise, let us enjoy the Dark Knight in all its buggy glory until Square Enix does something about it. And also, what in the hell is wrong with Darkseid's animation, man? It is the most annoying red glow with the repeating patterns that cover half my freaking screen I have ever seen. I mean, Dark Knights look like walking freaking suns whenever they're around. Change this damn animation, Square Enix, and I know you can do it, because in that job trailer a while ago, Dark Knights had a crazy black fire coming out of the feet that looked 100 times cooler than whatever this freaking energy red, I don't know, thing is. But don't let anybody tell you that Dark Knights are bad. They still function really well as tanks. They just need a little polish around the edges, and we will be ready to utilize that power of darkness to its full extent. So, see you guys later.